Thanks everybody for coming to the inaugural book club with RevGenius featuring Jacco. A lot of folks here have read the book. Some are just inspired participants in the RevGenius community. And for those seeing this afterwards via recording, we are a community of sales, marketing, and Rev Ops professionals. Excited about upping our game, building a community, networking with each other, and giving as much as we get. So we're very excited and honored to have you today here, Jacco, and Ken, who has been the happy go-between moderator and making sure that our book club is moving along at a happy clip. Turning it over to you guys as the stars of the day, but I know this group is eager and excited to engage. And if there's anything else we can do for you, let us know. But you're the one in control of the music and images, man. So I think the power is going to be in your box on this Brady Bunch screen.
Yes, great. I love to share with you. Yeah, obviously, thank you for having me and for Ken helping coordinate this. Thank you for reading the book. When you write a book, you don't write it for. I never wrote it for people to read it. I wrote it because, it's kept me up at night and I felt like things were going wrong. So before I start, any questions? What I would like to do is, my thought is a little bit of this. I'm going to give you a little bit of view in the future, like where we're headed, like a little like excitement. Then we look at where we're at today, field questions. I got definitely your questions queued up that we can address. But before I get started, is there anything you want to know about, anything specific before I answer your direct question? Is there anything you want to know? Anything you always said like, dang, I wish that I knew that better? I got one question already. That's the Red Bull. Ryan, what's a question you want to see answered?
Did I hear a question?
Anyone else a question? Because I saw Ryan going off mute. That's why I hear
I thought I had punched one of those emojis.
I've got one, and it might be a good table setting one, and it's sometimes a layup one. But you said this kept you up at night. So what was the thing that finally pushed you to write the book? When did you show up at the office or get home one day and were just like, you know what, I need to fix this and put it down on paper?
It's a multitude of feelings. Number one is I was so upset with the world, and even as every now and then I need to have a jolt of upsettingness. And so for those of you who didn't see my LinkedIn post yesterday, that simple LinkedIn post on the President's Club, that creates always enough. I poke every now and then at the established, and then the established pokes back, and I come to the realization that the culture that is in place for sales and revenue generation is not a culture that I find reflective of a time and a place where we're going. And in this case, yesterday's was the President's Club topic that I brought up, and where, lots of people start, sending hate mail to me, literally hate mail. In this case, the topic that I brought up was, do we still need President's Club, or is it time for President's Club to be over? And that is just, for a lot of people, it's a very emotional, personal conversation. And for me, it's not. I think that President's Club, as the way I experienced it, is the established, it's a creation of a subculture by a number of people who then kind of keep other people out. There's often vice involved, from the old days still, and stuff like that. And so there was anger coming from people towards me for thinking different about sales. Second, when I literally one point in time, I got so incredibly upset. And it was that a renowned sales speaker held up his wallet on a stage, started to get the crowds hootering and hollering. And the first words that he spoke was, if you want to talk to a sales professional, you got to learn how to talk to their wallet. And he was holding the wallet up and pointing that to everyone. And to me, I'm just not built that way. I am quite okay with being involved in money. I'm quite okay dealing money, calculating money, making money, all that. I'm not a problem. It's not the reason I do this for. It's the outcome of it. And I felt like it needed to be archived, and and the right processes and what sales really is needed to be put on paper, so that we could communicate, not by alphas who are thinking this is all about making money and President's Club and whatnot. But it's a little bit more a more noble trait that we live in. How does that come across?
100%.
Fantastic.
And Jacco, do you think some of that too is coming from your background as an engineer, right? You were an engineer and then sales. Do you think that gives you a broader perspective of outside in looking at sales and also inside out looking at sales?
Yes, but think of the following. Sales is not a trade. It's not being properly trained as a trade. So anybody that comes in sales comes to that from an angle that they've never been trained. That has great benefits because there's no remnants, like we can change very quickly in certain cases, but it has also great disadvantages. And some of them I will speak about in a second, but that definitely helped. What helped me the most is that whenever I talk to a customer, they simply do not seem to be talking about the same thing that sales training organizations talk about. And I can give you a multitude of examples. Customers don't operate in sales stages. Nobody calls you up and says, you know what, can you move me from an SQL lead to an SAL lead? I'm ready for that. I feel really good about it. I slept on it last night. I'm ready to become an SAL. Like, you don't think it that way, right? And so, commission plan. If you know that you're a commission check waiting for a salesperson to happen that is trying to sell to you, that doesn't make you feel comfortable. Go to the doctor thinking to yourself, if he sells me heart surgery today, he's going to make $10,000, and then he recommends to you heart surgery. Like, how would you think about that? In sales, we think it's the most common thing. It's, it's to be rewarded. And so I found that indeed, from that outside point of view, I find that we are very infected, and I mean that not as affected, but infected with alpha behavior that at times is great and is absolutely needed, but at times, in many occasions, has disastrous behavior on scaling and building structural, correct sales organizations. And that is the pain that we have to live with. Everybody has something to carry. Every trade has, and that's our cross to carry, or our anchor to drag along. Go ahead, Jesse.
Do you think that alpha behavior in the beginning of the sales process leaks over to the long-term relationship of large B2B and enterprise contracts and the sort of CS function that, may not sort of like service the accounts the way they should because of the bravado and the energy and the sort of culture?
Yeah, I think the first part is that we have to realize is that alpha behavior is extremely valuable. It's like a metal. It's a rare metal. It's a rare energy that you need. And when you need it is when you open up a new market. You open up something brand new. You got to kickstart something. There's nothing. New territory needs to be conquered. In this case, a la Top Gun, like Tom Cruise, chewing gum, ready to, right? You need somebody who feels indestructible and who's gonna go in there, right? That is understood, and it's very valid. You can build a scalable sales organization on like 25 Top Gun pilots who think they're going to like shoot everybody, put, bogeys. And as you may have seen some in the LinkedIn, consider, like working with a team as softening up and working with customers as the hard part of the deal. Like that is like, what do you do? What are you thinking about? Like, no, this is like so much more to it. So much more empathy and compassion for your customers and understanding of proper sales process and execution. And as in a second I will show to you is I'll do the most, like I said, the most dangerous thing to you that I can. I will open you up to what it can be and where we're headed. And once I do that, there is no unseeing what I've demonstrated you. There's no button that, like you suddenly go like, oh, I skipped that, the Man in Black button. So in a second, I'll show you, like, you go like, oh yes, that's what we want. Thank you, Jesse. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Hey, Jacco, this is Zane. I noticed you published a few books. Could you kind of share us to the thought process behind each of the books that you published?
Yeah, we have 7 or 8 books, and there's only 2 books that really qualify as books 3. Blueprints for a SaaS sales organization is essentially the idea of understanding how to deal with process and seeing sales as a process. Blueprints for a SaaS sales organization. And it came from the idea is that I wanted to demonstrate that you can essentially have blueprints and that you can blueprint your organization. I've always found it weird that if you go into an organization and you start thinking about like, hey, I want to upgrade a tool or something like that, that, you know, that there's no blueprint. There's no like standardized way of demonstrating it. And that seemed to be odd to me. So I wanted to build blueprints. In a second, I will share with you our own blueprints on winning by design. So you get an idea of how it can look. The second book that I needed to create was the understanding that math has an impact. Now, granted that what I wrote that book about, it only became a fraction because there were various, how do you call it, safety measures in our company that told me to not write about the math that I wanted to write. I had to tune it down by about 90% to make it readable, because the first book that I wrote on that topic, people go like, nobody will like that, don't do it. And so, and then, you know, like lo and behold, we had to write a book from 0 to 10 million, which is kind of like everything combined and how do you make it digestible. And, you know, like, so those are the 3 books. And other than, after that, we wrote implementation guides, SDRs, AE, CSMs, just to help people get going. Okay, I'm picking a song. I'm going to pick a song. I want a good song. What is a good song? Let me see. Yes. See? Now it's not as quiet anymore. Okay. Are you ready? I am going to do something. I'm seeing that the chat is in there. Any good? Any Sari or Ken, any question in the chat that I should address?
Just how long did it take you to write this book?
Anybody who wants to write a book, you got to make a choice. Either you have a partner in life, a kid, or you write a book. It's one or the other. Like it is that much time and energy. The great idea about creating a book, I'd highly recommend it, is it structures your thoughts. So, you know, like structure, it helps you create and think through things. So that I highly recommend. Hi. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to describe a little bit to you. I'm going to take you through a little bit of an experience. And, you know, like the idea behind that experience is that, you know, like of what it can be. Okay. I want to share with you the thoughts and ideas that go on in my mind. And some people think like, oh, it's great. You know, like when people have that, I have to tell you, this keeps me up at night, literally. I'll take you through it. Here we go. What I find is that, you know, like if I look at another trade, and I'm going to look at the design and architecture of a bridge. If I see down here, this motorcycle wants to go across. They want to close a gap. Now, how does this person get to the other side? Anybody in ID, what do I do to get to the other side? What are my options? What can I build? What can I do?
Build a bridge.
Build a bridge. Number one thing. What's another thing? Not a bridge.
Probably you can boat.
A boat.
Across.
So
you can fly across. You can catapult yourself.
Jump it.
Can we swim?
You can swim across. There you go. So you can build things. So what you see, what I'm going to do, I'm going to build a ferry and a bridge, right? Okay. Now, in this case, what do I decide? How do I make the decision between the ferry and the bridge? What is the determining factor whether I pick one or the other in this case?
Isn't it usually the classic triangle of speed, quality, and price?
Okay, speed and quality, yeah. And so in this case, you know, like I'm going to say, yeah, like speed, all of the bridge will always benefit. But the one thing down here is in this case, I'm going to say, what is the volume of traffic? So I'm going to design a bridge. I'm going to see a lot of volume of traffic. So I'm going like, probably based on the amount of weight, blah, 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 I'm going to need the bridge. Now, when I take that bridge, I'm going to say, once I start thinking about a bridge it is, I have to think about everything involved. I have to say like, hey, what is the water current? What is the water height? What is it generally? How high does it go? Is there traffic on the water, like boats coming through? Is there is there ice? Does it freeze up? Does it come down? Ice sheets. Are there floods? Is it mostly a dry river? But when it comes in high floods. Is there a forest upstreams which brings tree trunks down? right? So I have to literally think about all these things. Then, is the soil where we're building a bridge? Is there earth movement? Is there earthquakes? What is the impact of heavy rain? How big is the span? Is there on the other side a harbor that lots of traffic comes through? Is there farmland that tractors will drive over the bridge? Is there an airport? Is there construction? Yeah, all these things need to be considered. Like, what is the impact of the sun, which heat, which makes expansion? Is there wind, resonance? All these all go into a bridge. And if we think about it, it's not that easy in the beginning. Then we have to pick what kind of bridge. Are we going to build a beam bridge, a suspension bridge, a truss? What we do in this case, we're going to pick, in this case, the most beautiful bridge in my, like I would say cable stayed and suspension, our most beautiful bridge, but I take, a Golden Gate-like suspension bridge. And as I build that bridge, I'm going to divide it into components, because by building a bridge, I cannot just build it, and start, like testing it. I'm going to divide it into subcomponents. So the components I'm going to divvy it up in is I'm going to see anchorage, tower, pier, deck, suspender cable. Those combined form the bridge, basic elements. Now, components, in this case, are self-contained subparts of a larger entity. They by themselves work. If I look at the suspender cable, I'm going to use in a second a mathematical model, a computer model, and some other things, but I'm going to use several models in order to do that. What I then do is if I look at the mathematical model, I'm going to say, like, you know what, based on a suspender cable bridge, I'm going to have a compression model and a tension model. Green is compression, red is tension. Based on that, sorry, go ahead.
One quick thing, Jacco. A couple of the participants have asked if we can maybe make it full screen. They're having trouble reading some of the stuff on the screen.
If you click to the presenter view while he's talking, he'll fill the screen. So if you switch from the Brady Bunch view to the presenter view.
Let's also make sure we do that, yes.
Or you can pin his video. That's the other way to do it.
Pinning the video is the right thing to do. Yes, that's right.
In the video.
And so what you'll see down here is if I take that model, compression and tension, my next logical step is where I'm going to calculate and figure out what's really happening. That you see here, I'm using mathematical, I start to use a mathematical model. Now, math is better than a benchmark. Later on, you're going to find that in today's world, we often rely on benchmark. LTV to CAC ratio of 3 is a form of a benchmark. But benchmarks are based on historic experiences. So if we go through a culminating event, that, like we have gone with COVID, suddenly our benchmarks are no longer valid. Things have changed. But the mathematics behind it has not changed. And so what you'll see down here is the suspension, like although we may change material, the mathematical formula should still be able to calculate how many of what and X, Y, and Z. If we can put that into a computer program, we can compute the performance. We can now say under different circumstances, this is how that bridge will perform. Here's where the calculations, the weight, the strain, and so on and so forth. And as we then look at it, we can take out of that a particular piece of material we call blueprints, and we say, like, now we know how to build it. All the while, we have now built a bridge. We've architected it properly. We built it down in models, we broke it down, we designed it. If we don't do it right, bad stuff happens. There are consequences of bad design. In this case, unfortunately, 42 people were passed away over this or got killed by this bridge accident. It's in Turin,
Genoa.
And as you see, the disaster is quite big. You can still see some of the models, right? That is one of the pillar models, so that still seems to work. But you see that certain parts of the bridge have broken. Now, when something like this happens, obviously there's an investigation. And then in that investigation, we use other models. We start testing it, and you'll see later on in that video, if you find it one day, you'll see people are starting to test it. Where did it go wrong? And we use models for testing and whatnot. Okay, I don't think you thought that you were going to think about bridges today. I know that many of you go like, wait, what? Was this SAS? Let me apply this to you. Objective. We are looking at building bridges that cover great spans. We are not here. Our business, SAS business, doesn't grow over small creeks and canyons. We build in SAS, per definition, large bridges. All of us on this call do. We're not here for 2% growth, 3% growth. We're generally here 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% growth. What you see down here, the objective in generally on that at the top is rapid growth, hyper growth, preferably via forms of blitz scaling. Quick, quick, quick. As you read what I say, and I read it out loud, some of the world's most renowned business leaders are literally, I mean literally, recommending to all of us to hack our way to success. They publish books and articles that talk about it as if the only option to succeed is hiring the right people, blitz scale, do something in the organization, break it, like fire the engineering department, whatever they come up with. This is what they cut. This is their way. And I want to let you know, it is not. It doesn't have to be the only option. I'm not foolish enough to go against some of these renowned people here. I'm just saying it's not right that we think that doing that. Now, if you look at what the behavior is, in generally, the data model that is used is a bring your own model, come up with your own metrics. Everybody defines their own MQL, their own SQL, define their own client acquisition. Everybody's kind of like defining it. There's no standard that you say, oh, I am, like triple E certified, standardized, or whatever. Mathematical models. We're using rules of thumb. Rules of thumb like LTV to CAC ratio should be 3. Bigger, great. Lower, not so great. 2% churn per month. Bigger, not good. Lower, great. 200 accounts per CSM. Like, who came up with these numbers? Like, where was the reasoning behind this? I'm not saying that they are right or wrong. I'm like, can somebody please tell me why is it 200 accounts per CSM? Who came up with that number? The computer model is often something like, I heard it from a speaker at a conference, like they said SDRs and AEs is a great organization, or ABM is the new stuff, or you know what, you should get this new tool. The implementation almost always is hire the right people who've done it before, use Medic, buy the cool tools. This is always almost like, this is what we do, prototype. You know how we prototype? All of you are prototyping every day and then see what happens. No blueprints, no architects. And when it goes wrong, guess who gets blamed? Us. We blame the people. The failure rate of this, as I say at the bottom, if you compare how many of us achieve a $1 billion evaluation, the failure rate of this is nearly 100%. Because only 10% get X, then 10% goes to B round, then 10% gets to 50 million. And you measure it out, you have a nearly 100%. Okay, you can convince me it's 99.5%. The point is the failure rate is so high that we all find it so acceptable in order to achieve this. That is what is, that's the way how we rate. If we would do this with bridges, and we say, you know what, drive over the bridge. No, there's about 1 in 1,000 chance that you make it to the other end. But, generally, you may only go 1/3. We'll see what happens. Like, that is the world we live in. That's the world that people around me are telling me to accept and say, that's the norm, learn to live with it. I refuse it. I believe that companies can be properly designed, that you don't have to be a $1 billion company to be a great company. There's great family business. There's great profitable business that we can design and create. And so I believe that we can change this. Because if I'm not, then all of us on this call are part of the world's largest field test. In the field test, we are not the scientist testing the rats. We're not that. I leave that up to you to believe, what are we? If we're not the scientists, right? I think, was it Mark Cuban? Look around you. If you don't find a fool in the deal, you're the fool. That's us. And I refuse to accept that. What I define and what I want you to encourage in you is for all of us to establish models that are mathematical, models that are design driven, models that can be reused again and again, that can be improved over time, that can be passed on, not by some intellectual property, but that are part of the public domain, like math is part of the public domain. Nobody owns X plus Y, I believe. In this, it's simple. You can see down here, there's our span. There's the bridge we need to do. There's our two anchoring points. We have current revenue, we have revenue goal, whether it's months, quarters, years, we need to build a growth path in between. That's what we do. We build these bridges. I find that there's about 7 models that we need to think about. These 7 models are a business model, and so on and so forth. I'll take 5 of those models and give a very simple perspective. Business model, think of SaaS, subscription, and usage. There are more. I'm just putting 3 on average in here just to get you an idea. Data model, are we going to be monthly or annual recurring revenue? Is it perpetual? Is it ad business? Mathematical model, are we running a linear model, exponential or compound? Growth model, are we going to follow T2, T2D3? Are we going to go LTV to CAC or sustainable? Hypergrowth really is telling you, okay, you need to accomplish this. LTV to CAC tells you like, look, if you're under or above, you're going to fail. And what we recommend is sustainable, which essentially says is, look, if you spend 10% on generation, 10% of your annual contract value on lead generation, 40% on winning that deal, and 20% on achieving the impact, that's sustainability that will lead you to profitability. And then the go-to-market model. How are you going to implement this? Field force, inside sales team, outbound sales team, what is it? And so on and so forth. And then finally, what we are looking for, in this case, almost all designs, everything that you and I work with, aside from product-led growth, is considered a closed loop system. A closed loop system is the old systems where you program your car at 50 miles an hour and you say go, there's no distance control. And as you have a car in front of you that is driving 40 miles an hour, you will eventually hit it as you close the distance. That's an open loop system, no feedback. A closed loop system is where the radar, or in that case LODAR, is recognizing the distance and adjusting your speed. It gives you feedback. That is the ideal that we're going for. We want a system that has a feedback implemented. That is the challenge that we face as revenue architects. That is, like the job or the mission that I'm on. It's not a gift. It is more an anguish that keeps me up at night. And I'll leave it at that for now before, we may be able to step into some of the other stuff, but I'll leave it at here for now. Okay, that's the future. That's why I write the books that I write. Questions, thoughts?
I got one. So do you believe that SAS metrics are an invention by investors in order to understand and predict investments? And what sort of end validity do you think they have towards managing the client and not the investor as the focal point for growth?
Great question. What is on average, on average, how long is the return on investment for an A round investor? How many cents of time? How long do they need before they get their A round return? Anyone an ID?
36 months, 24 to 36 months.
Wasn't it liquidity event, which can be 10 years?
10 years.
Oh, 10 years is it? Yeah. Right now it's that. Wow.
5 to 7
on
years.
average, the liquidity event takes 10 years. Abhijit?
5 to 7 years.
9, yeah, like you're fine. Like 7 to 9 years is a good metric. 10 years is what they count on.
Yeah.
Okay, but what we're talking about is years, right? Okay.
The 10 years comes from fund return, right? So they kind of
Fund
work backwards
return,
from that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Okay. Now, if you're in revenue operations, what kind of time frame do you think in? Quarters or
years?
I don't get fired in year 3 for the first 2 years not performing.
Today?
Quarters and monthly?
Monthly, most cases monthly, and a little bit are quarterly, right? Yeah, monthly your revenue, quarterly your structure in your organization. So what we see is that both think of it in a very different time frame. So LTV to a CAC ratio, or if we look at client acquisition cost, does anybody know how we calculate client acquisition cost? We take the previous month or quarters cost of sales and cost of marketing and divide it about the amount of counts that were won. That is what an investor uses. Now, they don't use it on a monthly basis because that is giving them, like a fluctuating time. Oh, we had Dreamforce this month, like our client acquisition. So they're thinking about it quarterly. I can do nothing with that on revenue design. That is such a rudimentary metric that for investment purposes, it may suit very well, but it doesn't suit me when I have to calculate how many people I need to hire, how many MQLs need to be coming in, when I need to do things. It's a metric I cannot do nothing with. Okay, then I can say, well, Dreamforce, why don't we just add that to G&A, general costs, and we stop thinking about that. Okay, well, what are we doing with marketing campaigns? What are we doing with SEO? And what you're going to see is we need today to calculate in a way narrower field. We need to know this this SEO investment brought us X. This particular campaign brought us MQLs at an average price of $12. We are starting to come to that. The same way how we need to calculate what is the weight of a truck when it's loaded, when it's empty, what is the speed of a bicycle over a bridge. And so we're starting to think about all these things, and it all comes down to basic math. And very commonly, additions, multiplications, and subtractions and divisions. Like, I'm not talking about like we're going to take differentials and stuff like that or advanced trigonometry, none of that. This is often very basic. It can get complex because of its nesting, but overall, it's a fairly straight up calculations to be calculated. But yes, as you asked correctly, the time frame and the mindset of a VC is very different than a head of sales, who approximately, as you may know, has 18 months to 24 months of a life cycle at a company.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jacco, do you think it's just the evolution? Because, engineering as a science, it took a long time until, we developed all these heuristics and we developed those mathematical models, etc. So that means that sales is still, especially SaaS sales, is still in its infancy. And because now we do have access to all those great tools, we can actually measure it and build those models. But even 15 years ago, all people had were Excel spreadsheets, right?
Okay, thank you. I love this. Okay, so does everybody know what a SAGE is? SAGE?
Like the accounting software?
No. I mean, the person who magically puts potion on somebody and things happen.
See the future.
Today you're gonna walk. I learned about bridges, sages. I learned about everything, but I learned a little about SaaS. This is like what today is going to be about. Okay, so think of go back. I do not know how far we have to go back, but go back to a place where when somebody has a pain, we use a sage in order to fix it. We put some potion on it, okay? And then say at a certain point in time, doctors and the medical development became and turned into doctors and say, oh, you got a broken bone. There's no there's no thing. You just need 6 months of healing. Okay. And so somewhere there was only sages. Then there were sages and doctors. And now we are mostly at doctors and some occasional, therapy. And I do think in certain therapies make sense. I just don't think it's, 90%. I think 5% of the cases, aromatherapy, things of good nature to have help. I want you to think about in which age do we currently live? If we think of the world of medic, how much are there sages walking around on stage right now? And I asked them, hey, how did you do that? Oh, we hired great salespeople. We brought in sales development reps. Okay, why did you pick that? Oh, and you come to the conclusion, and most people just picked it as a sense of luck, or they heard it somewhere. We heard it through the grapevine that this would work. And you ask them, can you calculate or can you demonstrate it to me? Well, eventually the company hires, people that calculate spreadsheets, but very rarely does it start there. Most of the times, the first 3-4 years, they're just testing things out.
A lot of the times you see, formats or models come out of late 90s Oracle selling. So the causation correlation story, or the late 2000s Salesforce selling. Like, was there some magic in there, or was it just selling the right thing at the right time at the right place?
I can tell you, knowing a little bit about from the background behind Salesforce, nobody came up with the Salesforce stages by a sheer, thought about it. Somebody go like, dude, we need to put some stages in. What do we know? Oh, put these stages in. Because the sales stages that were the original sales stages of Salesforce does not carry any scalability whatsoever. That was the pure first enterprise sales dude who entered that in, and everybody just stuck with it. So there's this happens, and we're okay with it. I'm not saying we should change the world. I'm just saying, can we at least call it for what it is, and then ache for something better and say, our generation, it is our role to improve upon it. Not everything. We don't have to revolutionize. We can start step by step. Yes, Catherine Robles, I'm calling on you. What are you picking up? What is the key takeaway, Catherine, that you had so far? What is to me is like, that's really sticking with me.
Why are you putting me in this spot, Jacco? You know what? I like the fact that you're just blunt about it. And yes, at the early stages, most people are just trying to figure it out as they go, right? What works better for your business, for your teams, and to achieve what you want to achieve, right? Not like, obviously everyone needs revenue to succeed, but maybe what is driving you to come up with your business is not necessarily become the most richest person on earth, but just help others, or help yourself as you just, kind of evolve in some path or so. So it's interesting. The sages stories as well, very interesting. I'm from Colombia, so there's a lot of that natural remedy going on around all the time, and grandmas usually go back to it. But I agree with you. There's not that much, and people just, kind of do a lot of things and hire certain leaders just because they've heard they're successful, but not necessarily because it's the best solution for them.
Now think of the following.
Pardon me?
When we have a successful salesperson, right? The sales leader has been successful, and therefore they work 2 to 3 years at the company.
Yeah.
They do that 2 to 3 times in a row. They primarily have 2 to 3 experiences. Imagine you're working with a doctor who only has done 3 operations. And you then say, oh my gosh, I'm going to trust that person to do heart surgery on me. And you go, like, oh, which client are you? Oh, I'm number 4. Like, can we get a number 2 there?
Yeah, and I think it's key to really recognize that, again, every business is just different, and the time at work, in life and in the world that business is evolving, makes it a whole different approach. Not saying that everyone just needs to give it a try and, let's see how you apply it and what sticks, but it's more that there are books that serve as guidelines, that have been written by folks that have walked that walk, but you need to be flexible. That's key.
Let me not challenge you, but let me think this through. When you come into a doctor, every human being is different.
Yep.
But they end up automatically putting you in a certain box.
Right.
What you find, and what we found, or let me be stronger, what I found is that it always comes back to a few of the basic same things.
Mm-hmm.
And once you model those basic things out, you can start scaling those things very nicely.
Yep.
But and I can show you in a second about that. Thank you, Catherine. Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
Jacco, just a question. Okay, so now you have this model, you have like a model of the bridge, but now somebody needs to build it, and somebody actually need to educate, the execs at the company that there is a better way to build a bridge rather than relying on, hoping that it's gonna sustain the load, right?
Yes. And what's the question, Vlad?
So the question is, how do you go from having this model to actually implementing this model, especially at a, let's say, hyper growth startup, right? Because you need to educate these people because they have created the plans for this growth, hyper growth. And when you come in and you say, hey, this is kind of works, but it might not work in 90% of the cases, but I have a better way. So how do you bridge this gap between the current state and the future state?
Almost always, including some of the very big challenges that we see in the political environment right now in our world, everything leads to education. Once you educate, people generally solve the problem. And what you do, and I'm going to give you an example of education. I'm going to fly through this so that you do hit present. Then I'm going to reduce that. Then I'm going to make you click that in. Okay, I'm going to show you the basic models. These are the models that almost, we can design 99% of all businesses based on these models. Now, what I'm going to depict down here is if you think about all the terms of go-to-market, all this combined, we have all the help desk, prospecting, customer service, inbound, outbound, whatever it is. I'm going to say is like, hey, separate them. Let's separate what is blue is customer success, pink we're going to call that marketing, and gray we're going to call sales. Let's structure the sales. There's 5 different strategies right now. It could be 6, could be 4, could be 3. I pick 5. Then let's structure them in the right order. Product-led growth, inside sales, and so on and so forth. And what I'm going to say, I'm going to describe what each of these means. In product-led growth, it is the customer who acts and behaves as the marketing and sales organization. Inside sales, inbound lead comes in, closes the demos, closes, discovery call, all done by the inside sales team, and asks the client to sign the order form online. SDR AE, most of us are familiar with that. SDR goes outbound or gets a call, validates the client's interest and the ability to deliver, blah, blah, blah. Field sales, people with 50 to 250 accounts, and named accounts is like I was the named account executive for VeriSign for Disney. That means I know Disney very well. I know everybody in the company. All I'm looking for is projects. I'm not looking to get to know people. I'm not going to spam anyone, and so on and so forth. Those in the middle, I just changed because there's a lot of between these two terms, a lot of people confuse what is inside sales. So simply what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one stage and the other 2 stage, right? So now what you'll see is, at least I know what the difference is. One is only 1 person, the other I'm using 2 persons. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an XY dynamic, and I'm going to say horizontally, I'm going to determine what the annual contract value is, and vertically, I'm going to expect the amount of deals. Now, if I map that back out and I take those 5 strategies, I'm going to say, you know what, product-led growth, let's assume that probably is going to be really done for hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, to hundreds of thousands of people. Low product value cost. You're not going to get people to sign $500,000 contract by just watching a demo on YouTube, getting some chat support online, and then clicking on it. This is high velocity, right? At the opposite side, look, a named account, I cannot fly to an individual user that wants to buy a $30 subscription and says, you know what, I actually, I'm gonna meet you at Starbucks. Let's go have a conversation and sell them one at a time. Ain't gonna work either. So we know that named account, those large deals are probably gonna be in lower volume at higher price. If I map all those in between, I get this particular visual. We can now determine where does one end? Where does one stop? Can we calculate it? What kind of mathematical formulas can we create around this? So I map this, but I won't stop here. Next that I'm going to do, I'm going to say hey, if that's the sales go-to-market plan, how does my marketing go-to-market plan look like? So now what I'm going to say, well, I probably have inbound and outbound. SEO, web forms being inbound, outbound call emails. What I'm going to do is say, let's split that outbound up. I got, prospecting, a lot of volume-based outbound. I got ABM, thinking more about, addressing several people inside a company. And I got targeting, I'm just going to call on Disney and so on and so forth. Similar, I'm going to simply map that back to these things and go hey, there's probably something in this field. Again, later on, we can fine tune, is this the right or the wrong thing? We're going to map this back. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going wait, there's more. What is missing? There's one thing missing. What's missing? Anybody know what's missing? We got sales, we got marketing.
Customer success.
Yeah, customer success.
Thank you. Customer success. And so I'm
It's
going
like half the bow tie right there.
Say that again?
Well, it's like half the bow tie we were missing right there.
Exactly right. Thank you. Right. And so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do in community, which is do it yourself, do it by customer. I'm going to add help desk, one for all. And then I'm going to create smaller groups and assign CSMs to that. They're either volume based. Oh, you're going to have by the 1,000, segment based. Oh, you're going to be SMB, mid-market, or pharmaceutical, and so on and so forth. You can segment it that way. And then you're going to have, you're ending up at accounts. Here's the 20 accounts you call on. I'm going to map that similarly. And so what I have here is an approximate go-to-market model. What I can now do to this go-to-market model, I can say is like, hey, if I look at the bottom, where do I fit? You can put in a price and we can start calculating, is it right that if I am approximately a pro level, that I'm, a pro user, that pro users, that, they sell at $30 to $100 a month licenses, you're probably looking for an inbound model with product-led growth as your sales model and community-based CS. If I'm looking at SMB, I'm probably somewhere between one stage and two stage, but if I would move to two stage, $24,000, $25,000, that probably is prospecting, outbound prospecting, two stage SDRs, AEs, followed by, like a volume-based SDR, CSM that calls probably on anywhere from 200 to 500, which we can calculate how many. And if I'm on the upper end enterprise, I'm probably somewhere sitting between field sales, named accounts, and so on and so forth. What I can then do is I can learn what powers these GTM models. Where does the engine come from? Like, how does it grow? Because if I know how it grows, then I know what my team needs to do. And what you see down here is on that lower end, that pro user model. It is driven by product-led growth. It is based on reputation, good product. Often like what you saw Eric Yuan in the beginning, the CEO of Zoom, answered all the emails. Garaf over at Superhuman still answers most of the emails and calls on Twitter. And that generates lots of users. If you see an SMB, you see generally content and insights delivered, or insights delivered through content and events. And that leads to thought leadership. This is the reason why you see companies like Gainsight. They do large events. Events are so, like Pulse, it's super important for them. Thought leadership driven events. And on the high end, when you sell an enterprise at the high ACV, it's often brand, can I trust you? Will you support it? If the system will go down, am I standing on my own, or will you send in troops to come and help me? They look for people. Can I trust the people? Are the people that are selling to me, are they a known entity? And often they're looking for expertise-based relationship. Not just, oh, I know them. Do they have the expertise? These are three different engines that drive these go-to-market plans. If I then see, and I look at that, that gives me a pretty decent, picture of where I need to be looking for, and allows me to start thinking about how I'm going to design my engine, my revenue engine, and what can I do. And Ken, I cannot read, the letters are too small. So can you, if there's any question coming through the chat, make sure that you alert me.
Oh, I think the only thing that I saw was just, what about mid-market? And, the answer to that is, obviously it's toward that field, but it could be in the two stage, depending on where we're talking about, I would imagine.
Yes, but in many cases, mid-market does not exist. Mid-market is primarily based on creating or leveling the cost of selling against what the client is buying. But in many cases, the reason why these processes exist is not because the way, we generate or what, it's the way the clients buy differently. And in this case, pro users buy very differently than SMB clients, buy very differently than enterprise users. That is what is the main difference. Mid-market is either it acts and behave as an SMB, or it acts and behave as an enterprise. So, if you're a large organization, you can use the mid-market in order to grade your salespeople and give them a career path, or you can do. But in many cases, there's no immediate need for a mid-market other than balance the cost of selling against the revenue that they bring in. but there's no significant difference in buying behavior. What you do see is a difference in buying behavior, for example, from like a federal government, or where you sell into education, or where you sell into doctor's offices or something like that. You can often see like, oh my gosh, there's a very different behavior when you sell to schools, for example, versus, you know, like SMBs. That may be a differentiation, but it's not considered mid-market. It becomes a specialized market.
Jacco, would you use a dollar value as one of your places of crossover between SMB and enterprise? Or do you back it? Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, yeah.
I'll ask my next question after I hear the answer.
Okay. Yes, we use the dollar value. What we find, causality, there is causality. And so as I switch this and I switch to edit mode, what you can find, what we have learned over the years, that essentially this model, what you see down here, this, if you simplify this is one too many. Right here, you see often one too many taking place. What you see down here is one too few. Sorry, I'm layering it slightly wrong. One to all, one to many, one to few. Let me do this. This is one to all, one to all. SDRs, you know, like marketing, often very focused one to all. Prospecting, one to many. Hey, I'm having 500 people I put on my email link. Well, it's a little too much, but still one too many. Then I go down here, one too few. That sits right, that sits right here. One too few sits right as I move it over here. And then at the bottom, this often is one to one.
Yeah, okay.
Now, can you tell me, can you help me out? What sits here? If this is one to all, what will we call this?
Open source?
One to none.
Self-serve?
Yeah, self-service.
All to all, and that's open source. You're right, it's open source, but it's all to all. All people help all other people. And so now what we know is we model against this. Now, I can tell you this contract value below down here, now let me remove the bar, that contract value, this, if I take this $15,000 here, this is a relationship to this. How many deals do I close? So there's causality between how many deals I close and down here, which essentially make this dollar figure, I can calculate what that is on a per driven business. For many people in the US, we use that approximation because this way they can compute it. This makes it realistic for them. If I would say, oh, here's the formula to get there, people would, you know, like it's a little too far-fetched from them. But in this case, it's like, hey, about 15,000, and in some cases it's 12,000, 16,000, but it's not by a factor of. It's not like 35,000. What is 15,000? We are like 10, 20% off here, and we can calculate that. Does that?
Hey, Jacco, I have a question. So being an early stage company, if you have overlap with customers in, you know, anywhere from that SMB to like bordering on that more enterprise, you know, if you don't have multiple sellers, you're not necessarily going to be segmenting, okay, this person's mainly focused on SMB and then this person's focused on enterprise. So how would you decide outside of like tiering your accounts the best way that's approaching on the outbound side? Do I approach more of a volume base and still try and get some of these smaller guys and then, you know, match that like and just tier 1 and 2? Because like right now my CEO is very metrics driven, which is great. But there's also, you know, now we need to do a little bit of tweaking to, okay, testing more things where it's like, here's the math of what's previously happened, but we need to keep growing. And it's only looking at like past math instead of what's the new way to adjust.
Yeah, the most common mistake is that people bifurcate their business models across markets too soon. And so what you'll see is that, you know, let's say, you know, like you're selling a $25,000 solution. So I'm going to just rotate this down here. It's a $25,000, you're sitting somewhere down here. You're using a two-stage SDR organization. They use a form of prospecting techniques where they try to get in like whatever, 20 SQLs per month provided to the AE. And as a result, the CSM on the back end, you know, like does approximately 200-ish to 300-ish. And so we know what we structure the organization like. The go-to-market strategy is now known for that. Now we're going to close to an enterprise. Now here's the first thought comes in. When does an enterprise become an enterprise? If it's called Nike, is it an enterprise? No. Nike can have a pro user where we send to a group of professionals. Nike can operate on a group level and maybe more like function like an SMB, or Nike headquarters can buy it and buy it as an enterprise. The company size does not determine whether it is an enterprise or not. What determines whether it's an enterprise or not is their buying behavior. Because I need to scale my buying steps, the gates that I have to clear to the purchase. I have to scale that. And in order for me to make this worthwhile to people, I got to know, hey, I need a sales engineer. So very common in this field down here, field sales, you're going to see this is going to be an AE and an SE. We're going to have both a field sales rep with a sales engineer, a solutions architect. That makes it more expensive. And why? Because they often have to clear the hurdle that an enterprise says you have to do a proof of concept. And because I have the proof of concept, now I need the sales engineer. Now it acts and behaves as an enterprise because the sale is so expensive because a sales engineer, it's adding to the client acquisition cost. If you only use an AE, it literally doubles your client acquisition cost. Now we can say, oh, we can calculate and come to the conclusion, oh, it's double the client acquisition cost, and then we can recommend the customer. That means you got to strike a 3-year contract. Because if you strike a 3-year contract paid up front, voila, the problem is solved. Obviously, it's not that easy, but the solution could be, I mean, it's a potential. Selling to federal, selling to schools, they're willing often to not go through a complete purchasing process every year. So you could see, if you're a renowned name, you may be able to get away with it, and that allows you to change the formula in your best interest. What you always have to do and avoid, that you do this. This is literally, you end up not being good at anything. You're spending too much on one end, too little on the other end. And your worst case can happen is your SDRs and your AEs determine what they do with it. So you need to focus. You need to like build your model. This is the product we've built for this market. Often targeting a new product, and I'll drop it down here for you. This is a knowledge bomb. On this left down here, people buy product and expect the service to be free. That's what happens here. On the other side, it's the opposite. They buy the service and expect the product to be for free. And when I say free, replace that with the word they value. They value the product and not as much the service. On the right, they value the service and not as much the product. And so what you'll see, your product market fit, even your minimal viable product, all that needs to be built differently. And we often overlook that. We say oh no, we can sell a big deal to a big client. That doesn't make you an enterprise grade sales organization. Do you have the product for that? Because that, is a 24/7 support, single sign-on. It has a lot of other things where down here is like quick, simple, rapid revisions and stuff like that. Down here they go no. We don't want upgrades every week. That completely stresses us. Very different, two very different things. Okay, I'll stop it. Does this help, folks? I'm just trying to give this. I know it's your book club, and I want to avoid that this is a monologue. So that I hope that you guys are going to get value out of this.
Can I ask one more question, Jacco?
Go for it. Yes, please.
So the question here is, it's sort of like a follow-up to Calvin's question, to the previous question. But as a startup, you typically don't have that data. You don't have enough data points to go back. And where I'm trying to get to is, how do you determine quota for reps, right? And that goes down to how many dials you need to make, how many emails, and so forth, because you need at some point arrive at a data model where you see the conversion, and then based on that conversion, you go back to the contract value, and then of that, you go back to the sort of how much are you going to pay for the customer acquisition.
Okay, I'm going to step you through it. You're going to actually do it on your. You're going to do this yourself. Let me see where it is. Okay. I'm going to step through mathematical, and I'm going to zoom in on this. So instead of up, boom, ja. Okay, this is it. Tell me, you need to deploy quota from a mathematical perspective. How would you go about it? What is the mathematical formula? How you're going to calculate? And just rough it. Like, don't need to be accurate. How gonna you come to the conclusion whether you give a person the right quota?
Well, I think you go to Google and you say, hey, what is an average accepted sort of ratio between how much value a rep should bring to the company versus how much a contract how much the contract value is.
Well, I'm just doing this to remember, not to make fun of you.
No, fail.
Okay, that's not how we do it. How do we do it?
I'll give it a try, Jacco. So what can you rephrase the question again?
How would we determine what the quota is of a person in this case? And quota can be dollar value, quota can be how many dials and calls and whatnot.
I mean, what I do is work backwards. So starting with like maybe it's a funding milestone we need to hit in 18 months, or maybe it's something the VCs need us to hit, or maybe it's just a revenue target. And then I start working backwards. How many people do we have? How many territories might we have? What types of activities would give us the type of, I guess, volume? Like this falls into your math that you've been trying to eliminate from everyone. But, and then eventually you get to like daily activities. Here's so many phone calls and whatnot. And then you're tracking conversion percentages, which is where I hope you go with this.
Okay, so you're doing it right. You're doing it absolutely right. First, what you do is you create a mathematical formula. And that formula can be, in order to hit $1 million, we at a sales price of average $50,000, we're going to need on average 20 deals a year. For those 20 deals with a conversion rate of 25%, we're going to need on average 80 SQLs. Those 80 SQLs at 10% conversion rate require that we have 800 MQLs. You now have a mathematical formula. Essentially, mathematical formula is very static. In order to make it dynamic, I'm going to put it into a computer because some of these formula may be nested. Because if I say, where do my MQLs come from? That may be a nested formula. 10% of my MQLs come from inbound. 90% come from outbound. Those 9, blah, 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 blah. And so then I need to start computer modeling it. Now, in the form of visual modeling, I essentially create charts and graphs. And then the most common thing that we do not do, you got to prototype. You got to essentially ask a person who is going to be the guinea pig and say like, hey, none of us knows actually what we're doing down here. This is what we calculated. We make these bunch of assumptions. Over the next 90 days, we're going to see if it's work as advertised. Whether it works or doesn't work, not necessarily is the person's problem. Right? It's like, by the way, and this happened at SDR-driven sales organizations on scale, and everybody blamed the young people in the room and said like, oh, they can't sell. Like, it has nothing to do with that. Like, you didn't prototype. We need to prototype. We need to figure out what works and what doesn't. A/B test in emailing is one example of how many phone calls can a person make. Now, and that assumes that the phone call is the right way of getting, right? In many cases, it's the wrong way. And so we make total wrong assumption. But in that case, that is how you step through it. So what you're using 4 models. This is the key of this particular thinking. The key is you have a mathematical formula, which creates you the formula. You enter the formula in a computer, and similar down here, where previously it did, with a computer formula, you can model after changing behaviors. What if my SQL per SDR goes down from 20 to 10? What is the impact? What if the salary goes up? That's what CAT programming does. It tells you under the changing situations, the formula still works, but it just has different results. And it allows you to understand where the weaknesses in the structure are. Then you visualize it. Now, the reason why you visually do it, this is, for example, you structure an organization. I'm going to have 2 SDRs. I see 2 circles. They're going to drive 1 in IE, hand it off. Why? Because people need to understand where this all comes from. They need to understand, and often we use our pot structure, right? That's one way of how we visualize this. We say, here's how we do it. And then you prototype. These are the 4 steps. Now,
but I guess it goes back to the leadership of this particular startup or this particular company, because they have to have the mindset to be ready to experiment, to prototype, to track it. Because if you don't do that, then you fall into, you work with false assumptions that are not backed up by data. And at the end of the year, you come back as a, I don't know, VP of sales or whatever, and your hat is gonna, go off. So,
okay, let me tell you. Take an alpha VP of sales. What will an alpha VP of sales say? What is the primary reason of success of a sales organization? How will an alpha VP of sales say? What will they say? And you can use the rough language if you want to. I apologize in advance.
Well, I would like, they would probably say, I don't give a fuck. I know it better because I've been in that role and whatever, right? So I know it's my experience.
It's my experience. That's what they're going to rely on, right? When is their experience from? From when is their experience?
Probably from 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Did we have outreach?
No.
We didn't have outreach. Did we have sales loft outreach? We didn't. Did we have LinkedIn with full analysis? We did not. So they don't even understand. They're in generally, and the worst thing that they can say is, okay, I make calls, they need to make calls. Like Ditsky. The only time I put down my phone is actually when somebody's calling me. I'm on my phone the entire time. As soon as somebody calls me, I'm like panicking, like I'm hyperventilating. I don't want to touch any button. I want to go back. I don't want to decline, blah, 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 all that stuff. I'm hyperventilating. Nobody picks up phones in most cases. And here we have the VP of sales say, make some calls, write more emails, volume email. It's all the wrong thing. Why? Their knowledge is outdated. Doesn't make them a bad person. It just makes them apply the wrong process and implement it the wrong way. Volume-based process driven by like hard-nosed sales professionals. Drake, we got an intimate view on Drake. And so what we see is you want to be very careful. You want to be very thoughtful about applying that. I'm not saying that there's room for it. There's definitely room for it. But it's an exception, not the norm.
Jacco, we did have a call from someone who's clearly read the books, wanting to talk about identifying critical events and assisting the client to buy.
Now, one of the most, what we need to understand, the most common thing, and I'll write it down so that it is or if you can write it down in the chat. Recurring revenue is the result of recurring impact.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to keep saying that to the organization from the moment you arrive or that you interview to the moment that your last day. That is the whole secret to all of this. Recurring revenue is the result of recurring impact. If I say that, what questions come up to you? What do you start thinking about?
How do you measure impact?
Say that again, Matt.
How do you measure impact?
How do we measure? Okay, let's say we measure it at the client. Give me an idea on how we could measure impact.
If you're selling a solution that's supposed to help them save money on, say, procurement spend or something like that.
We're perfect, so we should measure it. And therefore, if they don't get the savings, most likely there's a churn risk, right? No impact, no recurring revenue. Okay, but the first question is, like you said, is like, hey, do they actually get the impact? Now, I can bring this all the way back and I can go like, did we promise them that impact? Did we commit to that impact? Then I can go back, it's like, hey, what did the SDR see on the call that they decided that we could impact it? Then I can go back to marketing. Marketing, did we market this impact? I can bring it all the way back. And then I can go to the following. Now, impact needs to be delivered at the time frame. If I'm telling you I'm going to do savings, I need to say I'm going to give you savings in 12 months over the next 6 months. That is critical event. That critical event is they need it, and I'll give an example of what you can clearly recognize it. If you're buying fire insurance, then in generally, if you never had a fire in your entire life, you never had a critical event. If the fires in California are right now, people are buying fire insurance left and right because they go like, dude, I want to make sure that my house is covered by the time the fire gets here. The critical event is there. I want to get fire insurance before my house burns down. Sorry, that's not necessarily a great example. It's just it's the one that is telling to many of us who live in California. And so what you'll see is that creates that critical event is the importance down here. It is essentially giving us the idea of what the client wants to accomplish. Any other question?
I have one. Back to the basic math that sets all this up for SaaS, fast growth SaaS companies. The predicted revenue growth already kind of drops out profitability as a measurement because everybody's looking at top line. You and your model bring in marketing, sales, and client success. The other number or metric that VCs and founders get behind is the almighty multiple. And the almighty multiple is tied to some number for some reason that says about 80% of your solution should be in repeatable SaaS license, 20% on services, which I would imagine you'd say does not fit any realistic SaaS company out there that is selling, at least at the enterprise level, unless they're hiding like MailChimp and you know, there's no support except your own support.
Yes, like if we look at the recurring element and the recurring revenue, we have to recognize that the largest part of the recurring revenue that we value the most is the service, which is not recurring. Sorry, I should have said it. The thing that we human beings value the most is the service. That's like when somebody picks up the phone when the building is on fire. That's what most people value a lot. What we commonly see is that is, you know, like sold or discounted or provided at like humming and awing on the quote. And, you know, like it tells you where, for example, where the future is. Now, many of you may know that we're currently live in a world where there's a company is valued at 5 to 7x the multiple on the recurring revenue part. Where does this come from? This comes from a time where there were 3 CRMs that were competing with each other, and on average, it would work out. I like to let everybody know there ain't no 3 CRMs. There's like, I do not know, hundreds of CRMs right now. We got CRMs.
Salon that I've been to over the years many times, and that when they said, well, we're able to accommodate people one person at a time,
or
and that we can set up that time, I trusted that. As it turns out, it wasn't set up, so I take responsibility.
I got it.
Okay, and so what you'll see is that recurring element is 5 to 7x. That came from the valuation on a moment in time that there were 3 CRMs and there's now dozens. We're going to see that valuation under challenge. I'm not as focused on that one. I'm focused on the following. When you sell a recurring service, you find that customers value the service, and that service is becoming more and more needed. Now, the service can be human beings, one, or excellent online support or excellent website. That is also a form of a service. So on the low end, we no longer are gonna, I mean, you already, I bet you that when you go into the chat box and you need help and they ask you for your email address, many of you will already be ticked off from the get-go. Like, dude, I go to the chat bot, finally I need some, you always ping me with the chat bot, I'm always interrupted. Now I want you, and now you ask me for my email. Where are you? Right? And so you're going to see that as volume goes up, we're going to expect people to have 24/7 support on the lower product level, and that support is a service, and that service is automated, botted, whatever it is, but it is a good experience. Other questions, other thoughts?
I had a thought, Jacco. When you were walking through that transition of everything being more mathematical and equation oriented, I mean, I love it. I think that's really cool. A lot of the sales operations, revenue operations roles, I mean, that's their world. Do you see that shifting more towards the general first level managers needing to be much more adept at math and this kind of analysis, and less on the managerial touchy-feely, like experience-based? I mean, is that where you see this all moving?
Not exactly. It's moving, and you're sensing it right where it's moving. What we are seeing, what we are expecting, and we have started to see it at companies, whether that is Google or some of the companies who are more on the forefront of these changes, is that managerial tasks such as performance reviews, salary adjustments, and promotions are going to be relegated to HR functions who are more suited, trained, and skilled to do that. where the role of a manager is shifting to become a coach, primarily deal coaching, assisting. It is really hard for organizations to have both the manager, to have the person who is in a manager role also to act and behave as a coach. You're not going to say, you know what, let's go over your call so I can help you close the deal. And the next week I do your performance review and I'm going to tell you that you're not making a promotion because you didn't nail your calls. Let's go do another call. Are you ready to do another? No, thank you very much. Please switch off my recordings. You're not recording my calls any longer. Like that is when manager and coach become combined. So we need to split that up. Now, what we also see is that the role of revenue architect is going to change. That data numbers are becoming an operational function. That architecture, process may be more an architectural function. We see the split up to enablement, and we see the split up to sales ops. Sales ops right now, for example, is tools, installing Salesforce, running reports, and other tools. Enablement is creating playbooks, training, and what. And so you're going to see all this separation, and they become all specialized functions because like it is we're no longer running $1 million to $10 million recurring revenues. We're running $1 billion recurring revenue organizations. And so as you get bigger and bigger, those roles become more specialized. I want to share with you before we, this is how a proper design looks like. There is no, on this one, there is no, I'm going to do it this way. Can you, like this, what I want to show you here is what we have. So in our own end, this is our own business model. This is our product. We have a $1,400 product-led growth kind of application. This is open class. On average, our clients have 3 categories. You often hear this about sales calls. We have clients who buy just a module at an average of 27. At 71K on average, they buy training and an assessment and a design, for example, or something. This is an assessment. And then at $168,000, they build an assessment and a training. So you see that these are training only, assessment and training combined of a group. These are like averages that we see. It tells us where we have 2-stage field sales, why we're using content and so on. Then we say, here's a data model. Our conversion rate 1, what does it stand for? What is our MQL? How do we qualify it? What is our SQL? How do we name it? Then we say, here's our process. Our process is, and what you'll see down here is our process. And I'm going to try to zoom in and I see if this still works. I do not know my new mouse controls here, but I'm going to zoom in. So you're going to see down here, our marketing content. We do podcast, blogs, speaking and workshops. Our podcast is our YouTube site and so on and so forth. At the bottom, we do not nurture. That's why it's gray. We do not do outbound. That's why they're dashed. We don't do any of that. And so we define, this is our process. This is what we do. How do we internally set it up? How do we route it? So there's a router, for example, that Ferry on the call manages. How does a lead get routed? We describe that in here. We have the enablement. This is our sales process. When a client comes in, what is happening? We then have what material are we using? We have the blueprints that we use and train our own team. Like where do we go? We have a tool stack. Which tools are we using, when and why and how? And we got our own pod structures, which is how our teams are being structured in the region. And this is going to go nutty. Hang tight. As I click on this is nutty, I know. Okay, this is nutty, right? But now I'm going to do a little trick. I'm going to go to layers. You remember Michael J. Fox at the end of Back to the Future? He goes on his guitar and everybody goes like, the dude is nuts. Like that's me right now. Okay, but I'm going to show you what happens when I switch on layers. And then architecture starts to become clear. So what you see down here, I now have the bow tie framework. I overlay on that the data model. What are we measuring, when and where? Then I can say, I overlay what are the client's journey along this? What is happening? Then I can say, hey, what are my skills needed that map to this moments that matter journey? And then I can say, oh, if that's the case, then what content do I need? Oh, here's the content. And then I can say, what tools do I need to deliver against that? Oh, I need that. And so on and so forth. In the end, I can even determine this is how we map that process. The model is the bow tie. I map the data model to it. I map the process to it. I map the tool stack to it, and so on and so forth. For me, I dream of a world where 5 years, 10 years from now, when a company says, hey, I want you to update my process, I get something like this, and these are blueprints that you roll out on a desk, you scratch and you discuss it, and you see where does the tool stack integrate, how does this interfere, and whatnot. That's what I dream of.
What if you walk through the tool one? I'm curious. I don't know if everybody else is, but.
Say that again?
What if you walk through the tool one, that tool layer?
Yes.
I'm just curious how you've thought about it compared to the customer journey.
Yes.
And how your reps need to sell along that customer experience.
Okay, let me see. I am Moment It Matter. I'm going to go back to the tool stack. I'm going to hit share. Sorry, this view, what is the particular thing that you're looking for?
I'm just curious how you thought about aligning the tools to what the seller needs to do along the customer experience.
Okay, so what you see on the left vertical, you see the way how tools are structured. Platform structure, on top of that applications, these are integrated applications. On top of that, these are standalone applications. And on top of that, professional services. So what I built is when you build a tool stack, you build it from the point in time. So in our case, we are completely built on Google Office Suites. Mm-hmm. And then we integrate the different tools in that. Now, what is not here, which is my desire, is what you call the web calls are not in here. I'm not telling you, HubSpot is not right now telling you down here what is written and what it's pulling from Google. That is an ideal world. As an engineer, I would want that. Hey, because as many of you know, when I say, oh, we integrate with Salesforce, as somebody says that to me, I'm going like, what does that mean, integrate? Is it real time? Is it non-real time? Which field do you update and which not? Like, there's so much depth that needs to be done. I don't even want to get there because this already, like shakes people to the core when we draw this up. What you see down here is our tool stack, what we use, and at the top, you see the meeting structure. For a proposal, we use Zoom, PandaDoc. Internally, we talk about it through Slack. Proposal is filed and archived in HubSpot, and it sits on the Google Drive. That's how that vertical axis goes through.
That's great. Why do sales leaders find this intimidating when you pull it up?
No, building data model. It's like opening up and say, like, where does it connect to, where does one box connect to the other? It's too much detail for most people. This is where, now we're in the field of an operational expert. All I want you to show, what I want you to carry is like, oh my gosh, this opens up, this can be taught at universities. This can be properly educated, skilled. We can have I am complaining, but I'm not exaggerating, where every tool stack, every top sales vendor, I've now talked to and said, can we please establish a standard? And all of them say, no, we don't like standards. We don't like it because we think we're the best. And we think that the entire market will adhere to us. And I'm going do you know why we all watch video on our iPhone right now? It's because two competitors, Sony and Philips, agreed to make one video standard called MPEG. Because before that, it was NTSC, PAL, SACOM, PAL Plus. When people start creating a joint framework, everybody benefits, but primarily the one who benefits the most are the first ones who created, they have an unfair market advantage. And so I don't even mention them, I don't want to insult, but I put every brand, everyone that you know as an email vendor, email automation vendor, CRM system on the list. Do you want to create it with us? And all of them said no. All of them. Nobody wants to create a standard.
So what would be an example of a standard in a set industry? Could you give an example?
I would love to already agree what we determine is an MQL, an SQL, a commit, what is an onboarded or activated client, what is recurring revenue, and what is lifetime value. Just commit to that. Then I would love to commit that one sits after the other, so that MQL sits before an SQL. What is a prospect? What is a suspect, right? So so that the terminology is the same. Then I would love to standardize on a bow tie model. Then I'd love to standardize on client acquisition cost to serve, and so on and so forth. And so sooner or later, we all communicate the same way. Does that help?
Oh, yeah.
This was very helpful.
How long, Jacco, how long does it take for a company to move from where they're now, I don't know, maybe like 200 people company or 1,000 people company to get to the point where you want them to be? What's the process? Just curious, like how long is your typical implementation of everything in your stack?
12 months.
Okay.
And that is implementation that the work is done, not that it's operational. It takes 18 months to be operational. It takes 2 years. The trick in many cases is to get the CEO and their CRO at the right time, to get them right when they start. And so that they are not yet blamed and out on their butt like a few months later.
Hard to plot this in with the average SVP of sales only being there for 3 years. It's going to take 2 to realize the value.
That's why we say it's commonly it is a CEO decision. This is a CEO. This needs to come from CEO level.
So do you find, Jacco, you come in, like if there's a leader change, like at Series A or Series B, and they start scaling at Series B, and then maybe like a D when you really start becoming a serious organization and maybe there's a couple thousand employees. Is that the opportunity window for you to come in, work with a new leader who's maybe a bit more seasoned and wants to mature the process?
3 things are needed for you know, like, and I think that they are, you know, rather than making it as if we could sell, I rather want to see when you yourself can be operational. You need 3 things as a revenue design architect to have. Number 1, you need approximately 10 to 20 people that can execute things in the field. You cannot say it's like, I'm going to deploy all this and how many, I got 1 SDR, 1 AE, and I got a CSM. Like let's go. In that case, let's have the best superstar humanly possible. Give them a boatload of money. Red Bull, go. Right?
Oh my gosh, this is the funniest thing ever.
Catherine, you're with me, right? You're completely with me. Okay. And so we need 10 to 20 people. So that's 1. Second, we need money. We need campaigns. We need SEO campaigns. We need to spend things. Things need to be bought, you know, like, and I'm not saying employees, but I mean, we have to have subcontractors. Things need to happen. So we need money. That in generally mean you need venture capital. And that generally means that you're going to, you need a recently fresh round of about $10 million minimum in capital. And so that will drive that. And then finally, you need recurring revenue, because below 2 million recurring revenue, you're, you know, like generally people are just mucking around still, right? You're still trying to you don't know really what you're scaling yet. You don't even know where you're going. I mean, like product may radically change, but our team, it used to be 1 million, but nowadays with $25,000 to $40,000 platforms, you know, like you reach $1 million pretty quickly with 10 to 20 clients with some discount. And so we now say 2 million is really the idea that we can say you can scale somewhere. Now, listen to this. This is very simple. Up to between 5 to 8 million, 1 go-to-market strategy. 1. Beyond 5 to 8, your second go-to-market strategy launches. You now go either may venture into enterprise, or you may go low to product-led growth, or you flip SMB and enterprise, but that starts around 5 to 8. At about like 15 to 20, you scale people. So you're going to do a lot more of you're going to suddenly go like, oh, we're having, instead of 1 pod, we're going to have 10 pods. And so you're growing and scaling people. And that's where process becomes extremely valuable. And then once you hit, you know, in the range of 50 to $100 million, once you get there, it's pure optimization, 100% data driven. You're looking at metrics, you're optimizing people, you're constantly creating efficiency and effectiveness.
Wow, great answer. It's 500 companies worth of knowledge right there, right?
Yes. Yes, yeah. You know, like, and you know, for me, this, you know, like, and I want, you know, like, we in Winning by Design, and as you see, we have an open source kind of methodology. We push everything on our YouTube side. And And like I highly recommend, obviously, that you, if not already, I think most of you will probably already figure this out. But we are launching, and right now, as of next week, we're starting to launch all our new content. So all our new stuff in preparation of the launch of a new book. Every week we're starting to launch it. So make sure you are subscribed as we are launching that. But we're working on all the new content and including the new backdrop and all the beautiful screen sharing and the music that we are preparing for and the sound effects. I mean, like, we are so ready.
Jacco, how do you do? Whoa, what was that? How do you do the? Oh, I see the mixer. How do you do the reverse whiteboard? The see-through transparent? Like, how do you do that?
We take about 2 weeks to all learn how to write in reverse. It's like,
No. I've watched it. I've paused. I've watched. There's no way you're writing in reverse.
I think Zoom has a function to flip to do the mirroring, right?
Yeah, we flip in digital. Now, what I do is I write in reverse, and then I think in reverse, and then I flip it twice. So like no, but in the end we flip it. So that's But what we also notice is this approach that you see down here, what we're hitting on, this form of Blackboard, this is more of what we're working towards right now. So for example, I can with a single button map back and go to the other screen. And like I see you guys down here, I can go and get your questions, I can type in, and then I can switch back and go like, okay, now we're back on the other side. All this is all being prepared for the new content engine. Like we're using gaming technology, pure YouTube gaming and gaming streaming in order to get all this done.
OBS.
And we all delivered it complimentary of Winning by Design on our YouTube channel.
Well, that is great. I think you got a lot of people here who are going to be checking that out for sure. I want to also be respectful and thankful of your time today, Jacco, for spending time with us, answering questions, sharing stories, inspiring us to build bridges, of all things, and a little music along the way. I know because this is an active and sharing and communicative group that there'll probably be some spin out Winning by Design chat forum that will keep this conversation going, and maybe we'll have some things to bring back your way in a few months or quarters and share with you how the conversation's been going here.
My goal is to have ruined it for all your future book clubs. This is like that at this point in time. It's going like, what the hell, man? Where's your soundboard? Where's your black screen? Like,
well, just the bridge alone, we're not going to get anybody to even get across the water.
No. Like I'm please, thank you very much for having me. If not connected on LinkedIn, please reach out. Thanks, Calvin, for being my, like standing there, being my, or being the Winning by Design board. Appreciate it.
Got to be the ad for you. Remind everybody.
With that said, I want to say thank you to you all. Looking forward to another day. I'm going to start. Let me see what music I have.
Your play out music.
Favela, okay, for Brazil. Okay. With that said, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you